who is celebrating most as the results in England come in. Labour has taken control of 3 councils from the Conservatives in London, but their gains are not as strong elsewhere in the country. Both the Lib Dems and the Greens are celebrating successes. Results from the council polls in Wales and Scotland and the Northern Ireland Assembly elections are expected later today. Joining us now is Lucy Fisher, Times Radio's chief political commentator. Morning, Lucy.
Morning, Jenny.
So give us a sense of the big picture this morning. It's not looking great for the Tories, but it's not necessarily as bad as expected.
I think that's right. There have been some major symbolic losses in London, particularly Westminster Council. That's been Conservative controlled for the 58 years it's existed. The Labour Party overturned a 22-seat majority. Wandsworth Council, again, Thatcher's favourite council famously, it had promised council tax cuts to try and keep it under blue control, but again, Labour won. And in Barnet as well, Labour took it off the Conservatives. Again, really useful a win for Keir Starmer because it is a council that has a large Jewish population and it underscores the overhaul he has made of the party's problems with anti-Semitism. And again, that is a council area that's covered by 3 Conservative MPs who will be worried about their electoral chances of retaining those seats at the next election. Outside of London, it's quite a different and nuanced picture. The Conservatives have done less badly than they were expected to in lots of parts of the Red Wall across the Midlands and the North. Labour have made some gains. They have taken control of a new unitary authority in Cumberland. They retained control of Sunderland, which was thought to be on a knife edge with the Conservatives. But they had a bad night in Oldham, where the Labour council leader lost her seat to the Tories and made a disappointing lack of progress in other areas such as Hartlepool.
So it seems the further north you go, the more disappointing the results are for Labour.
Yeah, and I think that's a continuation of a trend we've been seeing for some years now, a polarisation of the vote between the 2 main parties in this country, where Labour has increased its grip, its tight hold on the capital, cities and university towns. And the Tories have been doing increasingly well in suburban and rural areas. But there does seem to be a lot of disillusionment with the Conservatives. The Lib Dems are having a very good night. I think they've outperformed their expectations in many ways. And that will give jitters to a lot of Tory MPs across the southeast and the southwest where the Lib Dems are doing well. I mean, they've even tipped West Oxfordshire into no overall control. Of course, that is an area that contains Witney, David Cameron's former seat. So I think as the day progresses, I'll be fascinated to see what Tory MPs are saying. We've already had a few come out of the traps, suggesting how concerned they are about Boris Johnson remaining in charge. Stephen Hammond, Tory MP for Wimbledon, which flipped from Conservative to Lib Dem control, saying that he is concerned about Boris Johnson's leadership. He thinks that Boris Johnson needs to bring in more moderates from the One Nation wing of the party like him. And also lots of Tory council leaders beginning to speak out. The most damning so far is the leader of Carlisle Council, who sort of said the electorate cannot count on Boris Johnson to tell the truth, and that's what's been reflected in the polling there.
And is that the critical factor here? Boris Johnson, his leadership, national factors rather than local factors?
Well, as ever in local elections, it's so difficult to disaggregate what people are voting on, isn't it? I think that there is a sense that the national scandals that have besieged the Tory party in recent months, most strongly Partygate, has been brought up by a lot of Tory figures. The cost of living crisis has been biting. There is concern a bit about Pestminster. But equally, people vote on potholes, the state of roads, bin collections, other local factors. So it can be difficult to tell. But certainly disappointed Conservatives in areas where they're losing are pointing to Boris Johnson in quite significant numbers.
There were some Conservative MPs who had granted Boris Johnson a stay of execution until after the results of these local elections, deciding what to do following Partygate and following much discontent within the party and beyond about his leadership. Do you think these results, as we see them this morning, and bearing in mind results are yet to come in Scotland, in Northern Ireland and in Wales, do you think they're enough to push the dial and to pose real problems for Boris Johnson?
Let's see. I think, MPs, like many people, are in some ways self-interested. So if MPs are looking at their constituency and seeing bad results for their party, as the day pans out. They will be thinking carefully about whether Boris Johnson remains an electoral asset to the party and to their re-election chances, or whether they'd be better off under another leader. That said, I think so far the projection is that outside of London, Labour's national vote share could be down rather than up. So it's a balance. Tory MPs will also be thinking, well, Keir Starmer doesn't seem to be making great strides. That also bodes well for a general election and the Conservatives managing to maintain a pretty strong majority.
And finally, Lucy, what do we know about turnout?
Turnout looks to be down by a few points. That's something we've known since earlier this week, when the suggestion was that postal votes were down by up to 10% in some areas. In some places, it seems that just 1 in 5 voters have headed to the polls. And that's being largely read as disillusionment with Partygate. Some people are calling that a plague on all their houses verdict by the electorate, just disengaged with politicians that age-old claim they're in it for themselves. But we'll have to see by the end of the day, when the rest of the count is done, what the national turnout figure is.
Lucy Fisher, Times Radio's chief political commentator, thank you so much.
Thank you.